Healing looks like realizing that I don't control everything, that I'm not responsible for everything. It's almost like a spiritual thing where I used to think that I was responsible to stop all the suffering myself. It's not unreasonable to think that I would believe that, because nobody was doing anything to rescue these poor animals. But I can't save 82 billion animals a year that are slaughtered for human consumption, land animals. So I just came to terms with the fact that I can only do what I can do. And so that's pretty healing.
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people. And support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
Gail Eisnitz is the Chief Investigator of the Humane Farming Association and a recipient of the Albert Schweitzer Medal for Outstanding Achievement in Animal Welfare, recognizing her courageous, decades-long work exposing cruelty in factory farms and slaughterhouses. Her groundbreaking investigations have led to national exposés on ABC's Good Morning America, Primetime Live, Dateline NBC, and extensive coverage in outlets such as the New York Times and the Washington Post, just to name two. In her memoir, Out of Sight, an undercover investigator's fight for animal rights and her own survival, Gail pulls back the curtain not only on the hidden suffering of farmed animals, but also on her own battle with a debilitating, long misunderstood neurological condition, revealing a story of resilience, vulnerability, and unwavering commitment to justice for animals. Gail Eisnitz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was beautiful.
Oh, well, it's impressive what you have done. I'm wondering, Gail, if you could take a moment, just if you were going to reflect on your 40 years of investigations, what really stays with you the most?
I think about the sows in gestation crates. That's what stays with me a lot. And the hens in battery cages. I think about intensive confinement. That's what stays with me. I've worked really hard to document and expose these conditions, and in many cases violations and atrocities. But those are the two of the things that stick with me.
Understandable. How did growing up with an undiagnosed neurological condition and feeling isolated shape the way you connected with animals and their suffering?
Yeah, well, I have this really weird visual processing problem. I won't say what it is because that comes at the book's climax. And I didn't know what it was until 4 years ago, because it was not identified in the medical literature until 4 years ago. So I've lived with it my whole life. I see the world as pixelated, made up of dots. Everything's made up of dots. And I also feel like I oftentimes have dyslexia of the world, where nothing makes sense, like living in a funhouse mirror. So it's very scary, very scary. And I grew up with it. I've had it my whole life. And every doctor I saw said, there's nothing wrong with you, get lost. So it left me feeling very isolated and alienated, and left me feeling empathy for animals who I think are isolated and alienated as well. So the connection was made from that.
So you found comfort in helping injured and neglected animals as a child. Is there a moment in time that made you realize that was going to be your life's work?
Yeah, there was. There was a documentary when I was 12 years old on PBS. It was about endangered species. And I venture to guess it was probably the first documentary on that subject because that was a long time ago. And in the documentary, a hunter used a rifle to shoot a mother polar bear, and the two cubs went running off, looking back at the mother as the mother lay moaning and dying. And the terror and bewilderment in the faces of those two baby cubs was just seared into my brain. I've never forgotten it because they were so frightened. They didn't know what was going to happen to them, and they didn't know how they were going to live without their mother. That's my anthropomorphizing, but it was just seared into my brain. And from that moment on, I knew I had to do something to rescue animals from the age of 12. So I was really lucky to know what I wanted to do with my life from early on.
It's quite a gripping story because we probably know what happened to those cubs. And I really admire how, in the face of that, you didn't turn away, as so many of us do. You know, you said, I'm going to make this my life's work. Let's talk about your journey of becoming a staff writer at the largest animal protection organization in the U.S.
It was a long time in coming because the animal protection movement was so small at the time. They weren't really hiring. So fortunately, I was able to write some articles for the New York Times on animal protection issues, and that enabled me to get a foot in the door. So I worked for a while for the largest animal protection organization in the country and as a staff writer, but it didn't fulfill me because I wanted to be out there documenting. I didn't want to just be writing about other people's work. So that's when I threatened to quit if I wasn't made an investigator. So that was the beginning of my investigative career.
Did you receive resistance from that idea of you being in the trenches, actually doing the investigation?
Yeah, the powers that be did not want to make me an investigator. I saw investigators come and go as I was wanting to be one, but eventually I was able to get the job.
Do you think that being a woman played any role in that?
I never really thought about that. I just knew the job had to be done, and I just put one foot in front of the other and just did the work. And I never really thought about my role as a woman. There were only two investigators at the time, a man and myself. So I never gave it much thought.
Gail, you've investigated everything from puppy mills to slaughterhouses. Which type of investigation was the hardest for you to witness and why?
Boy, that's a great question. Well, slaughterhouses, I kind of have repressed my feelings my whole life, suppressed how I felt. So it wasn't that hard to do the slaughterhouse work, but it was the most successful. My slaughterhouse work was exposed in the Washington Post, and that generated outrage in Congress and resulted in the first ever appropriation for funding for enforcement of the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act, which is ridiculous because the law had been on the books for 43 years and had never been given any money to enforce it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was the most challenging and the most rewarding.
Absolutely. I just personally find it incredible I don't see myself being able to actually witness it. I have so much admiration for people that do, and I know how crucial it is that someone is able to do that. But as you had said, the only way you could do it was by suppressing your emotions, because if you can't do that, how can you witness this in knowing that you can't really, all you can do is record it. You can't save that animal. That's got to just be horrific.
Right. At the time, thousands and thousands of animals were being skinned while fully conscious. and thousands were being immersed into the scalding tank, fully conscious. So it wasn't even a matter of saving an individual animal. It was a matter of documenting and exposing and trying to get prosecution of the big meat industry. And I think if you had to do it, Cheryl, you would be able to do it, because you just don't have a choice. You just do what you have to do.
I hear you. Well, as you said, your work helped secure major funding. And as you said, it was on the books, but it was not being recognized. So what would you say was the key to unlocking that door?
Well, literally begging a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter with the Washington Post to run the story. And then he ran 3 photos from our videotape of a live cow up on the bleed rail. And the pivotal moment was when a senator read about it and gave a speech on the Senate floor about how barbaric it was. So that's what it was. Not to say that the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act is being so wonderfully enforced now, because it's not. I mean, it's got money to enforce it, and they have individuals who make spot checks to see if it's being enforced, but less than 3% of the federal meat inspection budget goes toward enforcing the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act. So that's a really paltry sum.
I'm sure you're familiar with what's going on at Ridgeland with the beagles right now, and all that, all the media attention that it's getting, which of course it's tragic, but I can't help but thinking these are beagles and people care about dogs, but there's millions of other animals that are going through that and worse as we speak, and no one's speaking about it.
I worked with the 3 major networks in the U.S., ABC, NBC, and CBS, on my slaughterhouse findings, not my factory farming findings, but slaughterhouse stuff. And I worked with them for many months, gave them all of my documentation, all my videotape, everything. I gave them all my workers' affidavits. And 2 of them came out in the field with me. One of them went and interviewed 12 of the workers who I've been working with, who were unfortunately skinning and dismembering cows alive, and they were sick of it. They were sick of doing that job, and that was NBC, and they interviewed them with our whistleblower attorney who we had hired to protect them, and they showed their full faces, and they just said they were sick of doing this terrible job. And NBC, just like all 3 networks, killed the story on the grounds that they said it was too disgusting and viewers might change the channel.
It's just tragic.
You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now, back to the show.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Gail Eisnitz of Humane Farming Association. Gail, do you feel that your efforts to expose the meat industry when you face such serious pushback and legal battles, was there ever a moment where you felt like the pressure might stop you?
No, because it gets back to choice again. I felt like even though I was doing all of these investigations and I couldn't see straight and I thought I was losing it because of my visual processing problem, I didn't have a choice to stop. I knew these animals were suffering, and it never crossed my mind to not continue. And that's not only for slaughterhouse animals, that's for factory farmed animals too, because they have it so bad.
You are also dealing with a serious, mysterious health condition during all of this. How did that affect your day-to-day work in the field?
Oh, it definitely did. It was really scary driving because I couldn't tell depth perception. Things didn't make sense, and it was really scary traveling across the country. But it didn't stop me because it was too important to get this information out to the general public. That's what's always been important to me. That's why I wrote a book that isn't just about a litany of horrors. My first book, Slaughterhouse, was a nonfiction expose, and it did very well and turned a lot of people vegan. But the second book is much more for mainstream America. That's why I've told my story. Otherwise, I wouldn't have talked about my personal life, but I wanted mainstream America to want to read this book, to find out what I was dealing with, because I didn't know for three quarters of the book, and then sprinkle it with some of the violations that go on in factory farms and slaughterhouses.
Well, to me, your book speaks about persistence, resilience, and healing. So what does healing look like for you today after everything that you have experienced?
Oh, that's another great question. Healing looks like realizing that I don't control everything, that I'm not responsible for everything. It's almost like a spiritual thing where I used to think that I was responsible to stop all the suffering myself. It's not unreasonable to think that I would believe that, because nobody was doing anything to rescue these poor animals. But I can't save 82 billion animals a year that are slaughtered for human consumption, land animals. So I just came to terms with the fact that I can only do what I can do. And so that's pretty healing. That's enabled me to continue doing my work.
Well, you've done a lot, Gail. One of the things we like to focus on this podcast is the beautiful work that sanctuaries do. And I'm wondering if you find any time to go to a sanctuary, if you have experiences with them, and what your thoughts are around sanctuaries for animals.
Sanctuaries are just wonderful. The Humane Farming Association, who I work for, operates Suwana Ranch, which is a 7,000-acre farm animal refuge. It's the largest farm animal refuge in the country. We have over 1,000 animals there, and they are just living their best lives. We have emus and chickens and pigs and goats and burros and cattle and llamas and alpacas, and they were all seized as a result of cruelty cases. In fact, there's a cruelty case that just is wrapping up at this point, where over 250 goats were seized from a goat dairy where they were terribly abused. And Humane Farming Association Suwana Ranch is equipped to take all those goats. So that's and bottle feed them, and many of them are pregnant, and so it's just wonderful that we're able to take 250 goats from this case that PETA investigated.
Is your sanctuary open to the public?
I think it's open probably by appointment.
Okay. And where is it located?
It's in Northern California.
Okay. Well, we'll have to put that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and the animals up there are so happy. Oh my gosh. It's such a relief to spend time with them.
It's the only time we really get to see animals like that in their natural state, it seems.
Right, that's the truth. And these animals have all come from abuse cases, so they're just really loving their lives now.
And do you find it healing yourself when you go to visit?
Yes, absolutely. Totally healing.
I've heard that other investigators speak about what they do to repair and, heal themselves so that they can get back out there. And every time it's been, I go visit an animal sanctuary.
Yeah, right. Yeah, lie back on a pig belly like a big pillow. I mean, it's just so healing.
It's amazing how animals can be so forgiving. I'm always marveling at that. I mean, they may be wounded and maybe they have trouble with trust issues, but they show us, I think, as people, what it's like to offer unconditional love and compassion.
That is so true. It gives me chills. Yeah, they're so forgiving. They're just so forgiving.
Well, you describe out of sight as a call to action, and I would totally agree with that. So let's talk about a few real practical steps that people can use to take hope and, after hearing your story.
Right. Well, I mean, this may sound self-promoting, and it doesn't mean to be, but I just say get the book and share it, because it's got so much useful information about farm animal issues in it that if people share it and it goes mainstream, that's why I wrote it. I mean, I was out there documenting these violations in the face of law enforcement who refused to prosecute for the most part, and in the face of the media who refused to air my stories, although HBO did a great documentary, which aired dozens of times on HBO, which is really great. So it's not all media, and the Washington Post did some stories, and the New York Times did some stories, and lots of other newspapers, but the networks failed miserably. But anyway, should I tell you a little bit about the HBO documentary?
Yes, I was going to ask you, what's the name? Yes, please tell us all about it.
Yeah, it's called Death on a Factory Farm. And it was a factory farm where the sows who could no longer stand in their gestation crates were kicked and hot-shotted and dragged out down the barn alley to a door which went to the outdoors, and they were forced over a 4-foot ledge onto the freezing cold ground. And once they were on the ground, they had a chain fastened around their necks, and then the other end of the chain was fastened to the tines of a forklift, and the forklift was lifted, and the sows basically suffocated. Well, they thrashed around for 5 minutes in each case, and then they suffocated under the weight of their own bodies. And this is their way of killing what they considered spent sows who had spent their whole lives giving birth to piglets in total confinement, and this is how they were rewarded. So we were able to get that on videotape, which was fantastic. And HBO did this hour-and-a-half long documentary called Death on a Factory Farm, exposing the practice, the trial that followed the whole case. And it was a real window for the public into what goes on behind the closed doors of factory farms.
Well, I don't think that it's self-promoting to wish for Out of Sight to be mainstream, and I want Better Life for Animals to do everything we can to get that word out, because what you are doing and what you've done is a public service. Whether the public realizes it or not, we can't continue to be so cruel and expect to have peace. I just don't see how. So, Gail, I can't thank you enough. I wonder, though, after all you've witnessed, do you have hope for animals and, about our food system? Do you see something that is positive coming out of this? Is something good going to come out of this?
I mean, I'm an optimistic person by nature, but I'll throw out a little statistic. 55 years ago, we killed 10 billion animals in the world. And here it is 55 years later, and we kill 10 billion animals in the United States alone. So the way we're going, trying to feed the world, I mean, we produce animals in the worst conditions in the United States for export to overseas. So it's not looking terribly good at this rate, but there are alternative meats and cultured meat and things like that, which are fantastic. I remain hopeful. I mean, I just have to be hopeful or I couldn't do my job.
Right. Well, Gail, thank you for that. And tell us if there's anything else before we go that you would like to share with us that we haven't covered.
I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, I can talk for hours and hours about the violations that I've documented, but it's peppered through the book. So if people read the book, that would be a really great thing. I mean, if we can get this book out to the mainstream, it would make a big difference because people, as I said, people that read my first book, a large number of them became vegans. And this book would just open people's eyes to what goes on behind the closed doors of slaughterhouses and factory farms. I would say that people can join Humane Farming Association if they want to. That's hfa.org. Okay. And they can visit my website, which is my name, gaileisnitz.com.
Excellent. This has been a conversation with Gail Eisnitz of Humane Farming Association, and I'm Cheryl Moss. If you have liked and enjoyed today's conversation, please like and subscribe so that we can create a better life for animals.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.